Hello, friends. This is Maureen Lee Maloney, and welcome back to My Doc Journey, the show where I reveal every step in my process of creating a feature-length documentary, even the steps where I fall down and cry. Last week, I told you about the woman I met who gave me fundraising advice. Over the past week, she connected me with this new company called Suivi. And what Suivi is doing is connecting singles, as in single people ready to mingle, with organizations that need volunteers. So rather than go on some awkward date, you can go volunteer for a nonprofit event and meet other cool single people who are also volunteering. Isn't that such a cool idea? So they started in Austin, and now they're looking to launch here in Denver. So if you're single in Denver, definitely go sign up at suivi.com/Denver. Oh, it's spelled like groovy, but Suivi. And if you have a nonprofit, you should definitely look into getting some cool volunteers for your events. I'm actually really looking forward to having some Suivi volunteers at the Voice of Vanilla events coming up. So check that out. Some exciting news for this week is that I have interviews coming up. First, I'm going to be interviewed on the How They Did It filmmaking podcast with Ian O'Neill. Then I'm going to be on the Facebook Live show with Cook True, which is a really cool show about eating healthy and eating whole foods. So I'll put links to that in the show notes. You should definitely check it out. It's really exciting for me because it's like my outreach efforts are finally starting to pay off. Even though I'm just taking my first baby wobbly steps, at least I have some forward momentum. And eventually my baby steps will turn into toddler steps, and then they'll turn into adolescent steps. I don't actually know. Anyway, whatever. I don't care. You know what I'm trying to say. The steps get bigger and better. That's the point. And thinking about that has got me thinking about how much I'm going to change and grow during this whole process. And I've started journaling a lot more because of that. I've wanted to make a documentary about Madagascar ever since I got back from the Peace Corps, which was 10 years ago. But at the time, I wasn't ready. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to craft a story. And then when I finally felt like it was time, I started making very tentative moves. But now I'm starting to feel some momentum, and it's starting to feel really real, like I'm really making a film. And it's really exciting. And of course, I want everything to be perfect, but I just have to trust myself and trust in the process and really just try to enjoy and cherish the whole process, even when it's hard, of course. Okay, so today I want to talk about how to tell a good story, because this was something I definitely didn't know at the beginning. I was an educator, and I sort of came into things like an educator, like wanting to teach people about things. And even if you have a specific cause that you want to educate people about, it's important to start thinking of yourself as a storyteller instead of an educator. You'll be much more effective this way, and your film will be more enjoyable to watch, frankly. So, for instance, some of the things that I want to educate people about with Voice of Vanilla are like the harsh realities of growing vanilla, the specific challenges that women farmers are facing there, the impact that climate change is having. I also wanted to introduce audiences to the Malagasy people and culture because nobody really knows about them, and it's really cool, as I've mentioned before. Anyway, now to accomplish this, I can do a bunch of interviews, and I can have graphs that are loaded with data, and I can cram people's heads with information. But what impact will that ultimately have? There's a saying in filmmaking that you've probably heard, and if you haven't, I promise you'll hear it again, and that is show, don't tell. So if I can find a relatable story, I can demonstrate all the points that I'm trying to make through actions of real experiences. And those actions will be far more understandable and memorable because people will be able to connect and relate to them versus if you try to just tell them everything you want them to know. And if you need some scientific proof of this, you should check out a TED Talk called The Magical Science of Storytelling by David J.P. Phillips, who discusses how storytelling affects our emotions and our hormones. And of course, I will link to that in the show notes. So some things to think about at the very beginning of your story development. Number one is, what is your goal as a filmmaker? Like, what kind of impact do you want to have? And two is, what is the goal of the specific film you want to make? So for instance, my overall goal as a filmmaker is to create connection and understanding across cultural and geographic barriers. The ultimate goal of this current film is to develop that understanding specifically with vanilla farmers. So then it's good to go back and ask yourself when considering different stories or different filmmaking styles, will this accomplish my goal? What other possibilities could I find to accomplish that goal? Is there a better story, or is there a better filmmaking style? Or maybe even, is there a whole other format or medium? It's something to think about. So once you have a good idea of your goals, there are 4 steps you can take to narrow down a good story. Number 1 is to find a story people can relate to. Now, there are lots of quote-unquote universal stories that we all share. For this step, you probably want to spend some time thinking about who your intended audience is, because the more you can hone in on who your audience is, the better you can decide what story will appeal to them. And it's not helpful to think that everyone is your intended audience. Get more specific. Ultimately, you want to trigger an emotional response in the people watching your film. Number 2 is find a character that's compelling. And again, this goes back to understanding your audience, because the better you can understand who your audience is, the better you'll know what kind of people you should feature in your film. Number 3 is identify the conflict or the challenge that either your character is facing or that you really want to tackle in your film. And at this point, I feel like I should mention Joseph Campbell, just in case you haven't heard of him, or The Hero's Journey. Campbell studied world mythologies, and he distilled his research down into a universal story structure that ultimately leads to the development of heroes in culture. And if you really want to get into a storytelling mindset, I recommend checking out his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And there's also a series of interviews that Bill Moyers did with him a long time ago. He's passed away now. But the series, I think, is on Netflix now. I'll link to those as well. And finally, it's really important to go back over what you've developed so far and ask, what is surprising or unique about the story? Or are you just telling the same old story? Something I saw a lot from my film school students were the same stories being written again and again. And while, they may have been stories that a lot of people could relate to, they weren't unique. There was no surprise. Why do I want to see another version of the same story? I don't. Which goes back to, what is the purpose of telling this story? And I think that if you continually think about your purpose, that will help you do something unique and stay focused and not meander too much in your storytelling. And that's all I have for today. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. I really hope you're getting something out of this. It's why I'm doing this, is to hopefully help people make documentary films. So please let me know what you think. You can join the Facebook group, My Doc Journey. You can tweet at me at My Doc Journey, or you could email me, Maureen@wildairfilms.com. Have a great week, you guys.